Okay, so maybe some of you are feeling a little bit like me, in that these guys seriously have been idols for me in many ways for years. I got into graphics probably roughly 20 years ago or so, kind of in the high school and college era, and these guys were paving the way for what became some of the most important technology in the industry, period. And so for me to kind of be up here with these guys, and I've had the opportunity to work with them a bit over the years, is really special. It's really special for me, and hopefully you guys will appreciate this too. And I don't think it's ever occurred. In fact, I'm pretty sure that all three have been in the same place at the same time. So let's take the opportunity to make sure we as someone said, suck their brains dry. So before we get to the brain sucking, I thought what I would do is just kind of get them warmed up. We'll have each of them spend 10, 15 minutes just kind of talking about what they've been working on, things they're interested in, some research, that kind of stuff. We'll kind of see where that goes for each of them, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll kind of just see how it goes. I'm sure they have opinions on almost anything to do with technology, and I'm sure we all have lots of questions. So I guess with that, and we'll just kind of march our way down this way. So Tim, take a little time and tell us about what you've been working on, what's interesting to you, where you think things are going, that kind of stuff.
Oh, sure. Well, for about the last year, unfortunately, I haven't had much time to program. I've mostly been seeing Epic's transition into our next generation. What Epic is working on is really exciting. We've been building Unreal Engine 4 for about 3 years now. It's in really incredible shape now, where you can build software from anything from an iPhone up to a next generation console to the highest end PC available. It's just an incredibly big and powerful engine. Back when the original Unreal Engine was written, it was just me for about 2 years, and then I was joined by 2 other programmers to complete it. And now Unreal Engine 4 is the product of over 100 people working for many, many years. We're approaching maybe 400 or 500 man years in it. And of course, that's powering a bunch of games throughout the industry, including Epic's next upcoming project is known as Fortnite. It's a PC-focused game, an online game. Will be operated as a service. You'll be able to download it, go play it without ever going into a retail store. It's a super cool game. It combines building environments by day and then defending them against zombies by night. Sort of Minecraft meets Left 4 Dead. With a kind of Pixar-style art direction, which has been a nice contrast to building super ultra-realistic projects with Gears of War. So we're excited about all this, and then we're also working on other things, and I'll just leave it at that.
Fair enough. So, Johan, how about you? What have you been cooking?
Well, yeah, we've been cooking on quite a few things, you could say. So with Frostbite, we've been sort of slowly, organically growing that to be larger and larger. Essentially, mostly because, well, our games are becoming quite complex, and also we're part of Electronic Arts, and we have a lot of games within EA. So one of the things we've been really quite excited about and seeing is seeing these completely different types of games that we've never done on our engine before. Like seeing Command & Conquer. We didn't really think that was possible to do an RTS in our engine, but they managed to do that, and it's really awesome. Same with what BioWare have been working with, Dragon Age and Mass Effect, which is done here in Montreal, which is awesome, one of my favorite game series. And being able to work on the things you love with technology and graphics specifically and high performance stuff, but doing that in the context of having the creativity of all of these different game teams that are very, very different, and very different cultures also, but it's all under the same roof sort of, so we can collaborate in a very intimate fashion and see sort of what works and what works for the various different types of teams and what technology we can harvest and combine. So that's really cool. And we also, as part of this, back at DICE, we're a pretty big studio, but it's a lot more. It gets a lot bigger. You interact with even more people, and you get to see these interesting mixtures of technology. Like, okay, these guys are working on the water system here. That it may have a really good fit in this other game here. And these guys have been doing some awesome work on some other components that you're able to harvest and see. That's a different way that we haven't really worked before, and that's really exciting. And then on the other hand, on another aspect of it all, we've been focusing a lot on just really low-level performance and working on the next generation consoles, but also on PC, and just seeing where can we get to with graphics, just on that level, and then what can we build on top of such a foundation really, and something really excited about.
Cool, thanks. So John, you've been working on some new stuff compared to what you worked on in the past, so.
Yeah, so after we shipped Rage, I treated myself by saying I'm going to go do a little research project. I'm going to go look into the state of virtual reality, where if we go back in time 20 some odd years, there was the original promise of virtual reality in the 90s, and I was involved in that to some degree. We licensed Wolfenstein, Doom, and Quake to these little VR companies, but they were all very hands-off because I thought they were all loser bets. There was at the time, it was one of those things where there were some serious people doing serious things at NASA and some research universities, but they looked down their nose at entertainment applications. It was all surgery and architectural walkthroughs, but all the promoters were very much hucksters, and it's like, okay, we'll take your money to do the game, but it's not going to amount to anything. And I thought, 20 years have passed. Everybody had the vision of what we wanted virtual reality. We all remember that. You want to be transported into the other world, that games are an approximation of this. And surely somebody's done it now in the last 20 years. And I was really kind of shocked to see that really nobody had. That while we've had 6 orders of magnitude of improvement in our performance, that's just an almost incomprehensible number. But this stuff that felt maybe a little out of reach 20 years ago, nobody had yet grabbed it. And when I went in and really started looking around, what's there, what's necessary to do, obviously we've got the graphics in hand, but what's changed on the displays and the position tracking and the various other aspects of it, it seemed more and more like something, no, we can kind of just do this right now. This is in reach. And I was doing a bunch of things that I was kind of building. We were trying to figure out some way, how do you promote like Doom 3 BFG, which was an old game re-release. And I'm thinking, well, I'm doing the stereoscopic 3D stuff. People have 3D TVs. I'm not a huge fan of that. But this head-mounted display stuff that I've got kind of in my room back here is having a pretty big impact on people. And we decided, well, we're going to use this as one of our sort of promotional hooks. And before E3, I had been in touch with this guy, Palmer Luckey, that had basically built an HMD, where I was using a couple of different cobbled together ones from some that I had built, some that I had gotten from various places. But this thing that he had taped together sort of was a better experience, wider field of view than anything that that I had, even the commercial ones. And I used that. I showed Doom 3 BFG in virtual reality at E3, and it was a huge impact. We had so many people saying that all the talk of the Wii U or the leaks of next-gen console stuff, it was actually more exciting to see this duct taped together, hot-glued little prototype. And they went off, and Oculus was founded. They had a super successful Kickstarter. I went back to kind of doing the work that I was doing, and things didn't come together really well, unfortunately, between the companies. And a couple months ago, I decided that I was going to move working full-time to working at Oculus. And it's interesting where I have been through these 6 orders of magnitude of performance there. And I can look at some of this stuff and say, I remember what it felt like when we took our 2D games and we put them into the first-person perspective, and how there was this frisson that this means something, we're doing something different. It may be the same, you're picking things up and shooting at things, but it is different. And FPSs have been a persistent dominant genre over the time period since then. And I get that same sense with the virtual reality side of it. Right now, there's 30 some odd thousand Rift developer kits that have gone out to people, that are in the hands of developers. And there's all these things that are suboptimal, that are not right with it, that need to be improved. But a lot of people can see the magic of it. We can see we're not there yet. It's our job to get us there, but we can see where we're going. And it is magical, and it is something that will make a bigger difference than the next couple orders of magnitude that we throw at it from the GPU power. So I've been in this position where the last couple months I've been heads down, locked in a room, working really hard on a lot of core technology issues. And in many ways, I feel more like myself than I have in a long time. There's a lot of things that I'm having an absolute blast doing, working extremely hard, pushing towards hard near-term deadlines, trying to make things that that matter, that create a lot of value for people in a new way. So I am, as anybody that's been talking to me about it, I am super energized and excited about what we're doing, and it's going to make a little bit of a dent, I think.
That's cool. So kind of thinking about rethinking things and changing things, and maybe reimagining things, how do you think, G-Sync and a technology like this might change the way games are designed or develop their engines? I mean, why don't we just kind of come back this way? So maybe go with Johan, you want to answer this one, and then we'll loop back around?
Yeah, sure. So one of the key things, we've been hinting a little bit at this, is that games nowadays are giant, and they're so variable, and there's so many things that we want to do in them. And to be honest, we don't fully have control over everything that we're doing in them. It takes a massive effort to optimize the game for a fixed frame rate, and you're actually sacrificing things for it also. In some areas, depending on how you actually control your games, and many games are actually have lots of variation within them also. You want to use what's the most appropriate there. Some parts of you perhaps 40 FPS, some parts perhaps a higher FPS, but you want to do that and have a great experience at all times. So G-Sync really comes into play for those type of scenarios, I think. They're really adaptively finding what's the best fit for this specific game at this specific time, and allowing game designers to really play freely with that. I think that's one really key aspect of it.
Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this. People have come nowadays to expect a lot more perfection from these entertainment experiences than they did in the past. The one thing that really motivated that was Apple coming out with the iPhone, this product that's so polished, it really changes everyone's expectations. One thing you don't expect now is graphical glitches, and yet when you play a game, even a lot of the best games on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and we at Epic are guilty of this. You see tearing and you see jittery frame rates, and we've reached a point now where the technology enables us to move beyond that, and gamers won't accept it anymore. And so we, as the software developers, the hardware GPU makers, and the monitor makers, really have to work together to absolutely pound out all the remaining latency and jitteriness and visual artifacts from the entire pipeline, so that we can come ever closer to approaching the ideal for most of these games, which is a fluid and realistic experience.
John, so as you think about G-Sync, can you think about how it implies to, say, maybe VR?
Stepping back before that, so I fought the crusade for 60 frames per second locked frame rate on the last generation, and there are a lot of significant sacrifices that get made along the way. There were the constant battles of, we can't do this particle effect here, we can't have more creatures here. The game would have been better if you could just say, all right, 90% of it is 60 frames per second, but 10% of it, this is going to be awesome, and it's going to be a little bit lower frame rate. But we didn't really have that option, because dropping down to the stuttery mess of going 60 to 30 is a cliff you fall off of, and we weren't willing to do that. If you had G-Sync available on the targets that you're designing for, you're free to do that. You can say, mostly we want this to be really silky smooth, but a few places we just want to blow the doors off and have something where it's okay to chop down a little bit, and that will just unequivocally make for better games. I have a history with kind of old BizSim people where there was a crowd that used to believe that 60 frames per second is all that matters, and they would look down their nose derisively at PC titles. But the bottom line is they were wrong. It's a trade-off that you make where smoothness is important, but very often it can be legitimate and correct and valuable to the user to sacrifice frame rate for some things. And there's a funny story that maybe 13 years ago on the 3DFX technical advisory panel that I was on, and I was kind of bemoaning, like all that time ago, tearing, that you'd have swap tear going on. And one of the other guys from a more engineering background looked over at me somewhat accusingly and said, "It's your fault." And he was basically saying that the benchmark wars surrounding Quake and sequels were what led virtuous GPU vendors to give up on tear-free swapping, because it's like, well, you get a better benchmark result when you tear. And it was the right thing to do. Games were better when you could go between 20 and 30 frames per second with a tear if you care about the responsiveness. But we weren't between 30 and 60 where it's more of a no man's land there. So it was a valid trade, but we lost sight of the cost that we have there, that it is a bad thing, and now people just kind of glaze their eyes and look past it. And being able to address that is going to be really important. In the VR side of things, we're actually the dropping a frame in VR is like a kick in the head. It's a bad thing. You really want to be at 60 frames per second, and you really notice, much more so than when you're looking at a screen, when you miss it. But you also really notice the tear lines. I mean, a tear line in VR just ruins the experience there. We recommend people always have VSync on, but then the hitches are terrible. So like on a conventional panel, something like G-Sync would be a wonderful addition, because we fight that all the time. Every little stutter winds up being a very distracting experience. But the other side of things that's important, that a year ago I really had no concept of this, but the persistence is also huge. And that's the thing that I know you're not really touting it for G-Sync, but that's the other leg of the G-Sync technology of the 120 hertz low persistence display that is really important. I mean, right now, yeah, there's not much app content that will take advantage of it, but the being able to bridge the way up there with the variable content, and as we work out what we can do for merging the two of them between 90 and 120, that's going to be a whole other quality level that as people push it up, they'll get this. Not only do they get the general virtue of higher frame rates and smoother stuff, but then the low persistence will be able to start kicking in, and that's an added benefit that really almost nobody here has even seen what that's like, that it is that much better.
So one of the things that I found kind of interesting about G-Sync, when we were kind of designing it, we kind of postulated what the benefits would be, right? You get all the benefits of VSync off without the tearing. And you kind of can intellectually grok what that means, but then when you experience it, it's surprisingly better than you thought. And I think a lot of us we didn't realize even how good it would be when we were designing it until we actually saw it. So can you guys think of, maybe something, an aha moment like that you've had over the last few years that was either came out better than you thought, or kind of surprised you in a way that you didn't expect?
I mean, for me, again, the low persistence demo was something Valve did, where they had they were working on one of their research head mounts, and I had conversations with them previously, and my position had been, if we get to 60 hertz was clearly not good enough, and I thought, well, if we get to 120 hertz, that should be good enough. But they were very positive that the persistence of the display was a very important thing. And I was somewhat skeptical, but when they had it set up there where you could literally just turn it on and off, you can see that, okay, 120 hertz, definitely much better than 60 hertz, but that's still 8 milliseconds of locked on time for the pixels, and you really want that to be like 1.5 milliseconds or something. And so I was, that was in the space of a couple seconds, I could just go, yep, you're right, you are absolutely correct. This is a super important thing. I didn't expect it to be that significant. And I was thrilled to be kind of proven wrong on what was most important there.
And Johan, anything that kind of surprised you in the last few years that you didn't expect? Any sneak up on you? No, you predicted it all. Yeah, I'd certainly point to these VR applications too. Having been to Valve and worked with the Oculus folks, this is some of the coolest research occurring in the world right now, and the issues they're working on internally are very closely related to the problems nVidia is solving here with G-Sync. Absolutely minimizing latency between your input being received by the computer and the image updating on the screen, and dealing with all of the visual flaws that exist, some of which are increasingly subtle but become all the more important when they're wrapped around your head in an immersive world. It just reminds me that our ultimate goal with these games is actually to recreate reality. A completely seamless experience that feels that you're there, and not just to have players sitting on a couch in front of a TV and watching some experience. It's about playing the player in the world.
Right. So how about 5 or 10 years away? What's the world look like?
Boy, so we actually had this in an email conversation thread recently at Oculus, talking about, starts off with like, my God, look at how good looking some of these rendered humans can be, and we'll certainly soon will have worlds where they're interacting in some way. And somebody made the comment, it's like, yeah, within 5 years, we've been hearing that for 30 years, and it made me sit back and say, okay, 30 years ago, the state of the art was the movie Tron. And it's interesting when you say, all right, you can say, yeah, movies look so dramatically better, but I think the even more persuasive argument is like, okay, what used to take, half hour or something to render a frame there, we can render that in real time, better looking on a wristwatch today. And I think it's not the A-to-A comparisons that are the most persuasive about what technology will change there. And I don't think anybody from 30 years ago rationally would have been making a hard-headed prediction about where we are today, because you can't wrap your head around these 6 or 8 orders of magnitude that we've been since then. So, we can say 5 years ahead, yeah, we can probably all make credible comments about that. You'll still be able to buy an Xbox, Xbox One or PS4 new 5 years from now, unquestionably. There will be tons of content developed for that. We'll have 4K resolution displays on tablets and head-mounted displays. We'll have another, what is that? That's another order of magnitude, pretty straightforward on Moore's law, kind of in GPUs are great at turning transistors into performance, so we'll have 10 times the performance there. It means you could probably run that triple 4K display at double the frame rate from one GPU, which then that starts looking pretty impressive there. We've got it's great seeing some of these things these are technical freight trains, and they're going kind of whether we're paying attention to them or not. Things like the display technology, the process advances that are going on there, networking advancements that's going on. There's $1 trillion in economy pushing these things, so a lot of that's going to keep going, and it's going to be great to sort of be along for the ride and figuring out the kind of interesting systems areas where there's a convergence of what becomes possible now that people wanted before is the sort of the cornerstone of where the real innovation is going to happen. I mean, we can always turn the cranks on what we've already got, and it'll always get better, but the insightful things are when you notice that something that you hadn't even thought about, or you hadn't thought about in a long time, or is dismissed as impossible, is now possible. And orders of magnitude just sneak up on you like this.
So I have a little bit different angle of things. I have a pretty clear view of sort of what we can do from a visual point of view in like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, perhaps 4 years. Not exactly, not concretely, but still some pretty good idea there. And that's really cool, and there's a lot of pretty easy things we can do and some really hard problems that we want to solve with the pure visuals. But actually one of the hardest challenges, and perhaps this is not the absolute best context for it, but it's really important to understand, I think, is it's not necessarily the visuals and how we create our rendering techniques and how we update our games and stuff like that. It's actually, we would really like to be able to solve how we actually create our content, how we create our game worlds. That's a massive issue. I can see how we can do these super advanced rendering techniques that creates these awesome, amazing, dynamic lit environments where everything's destructible, everything's interacting. But how do we actually build those worlds? That's a massive difference, a massive challenge for us as an industry also. And it's not clear whose problem it is to solve that. It's sort of everyone has to work together, and there are many components of it. So music definitely has a big part of that, and our engines that we're working on definitely has a giant part of that, but also how we work as an industry to create games. Because, well, our goal with our engine is to be able to create amazing game experiences and really have all of these different types of games being able to, and gamers be able to enjoy those new experiences that you can get in games. And I don't really know how we're going to create the games in 5 years if we continue on the current trajectory, but we sort of want to create even better and even more amazing games. So we're investing a lot into essentially just tools and how we work with things. Yeah, tools, authoring, and techniques, and some of them are, well, innovations inside GPUs, some are in pure rendering techniques, some are just how do we work with AI in giant environments. And fitting all that together that's a massive topic.
And the creation,
massive challenge.
Game content creation,
Yes.
you wonder, does it start becoming like fab construction where only 3 companies in the world can run that next gen?
And I think it may have to become a little bit more of a larger ecosystem also, where you can't have this single studio with 500 people working on a single game. You have to have divide it up more and share more and do things more procedural and do things with better tools and better iteration times.
Proceduralism, yeah, that's the next big thing for the last 2 decades.
Yes, but there are aspects of it.
Yeah.
Pure proceduralism, no, but essential procedural amplification of an
As
artist.
content, as a creation.
Exactly, you're going to, for some of our games, our racing games, for example, have a 32 by 32 kilometer world, and you racing through that at 200 kilometers an hour, or I don't know what that is in miles per hour, but you want to create railings across that. That should just be super quickly by just creating basic splines there, and then everything just gets populated and updated and having good LEDs and managed there. Some parts where we can be there, but we want that across the entire world, how we create these things. That's a big challenge. and a really interesting challenge. And I think there will be many, many components of it. And it sort of covers the entire spectrum also.
Yeah, the content creation challenges are really severe. Yeah, we're really, at Epic, we're always caught up in these big questions, you know, and the next generation game budgets are going up to $100 million a game, and how does that work relative to the installed base? But when you take the longer term view, you know, at some point in the next couple of decades, nVidia is going to find a way to put 100 teraflops of computing power in your pocket, you know, instead of having, you know, the first generation of these massive displays that we look at, you know, that cost built with a lot of material, and now we have these VR headsets. But each one of those is a reduction in size, and also an improvement in quality. I mean, I think the ultimate trajectory is you have, you know, dual 4K or 8K displays in the form factor of Oakley sunglasses. And when you have all that put together, Carmack said something really smart earlier, which I think absolutely captures this. When you put all of those components together, you don't have a product, you have a superpower.
So, you guys have any questions? I can't imagine, can't possibly have any questions. So maybe the best way to do this, if we have some questions, is we have some mics set up in the room, and we can kind of ask the guys that have the superpowers, you know, the questions. So go ahead.
Hi. So I was hoping, Tim, you could speak to the interest in VR at Epic. It's something that we haven't really seen major developers like Epic really step into in terms of development stuff, right? In terms of software support.
Oh, sure. Epic's looking at this entirely from the software side, because the work that Oculus and Valve and others are doing is totally blazing the way in hardware. But we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of the early stuff, and it's just mind-boggling. You know, I feel like we're right now, it's not ready for prime time yet. The hardware needs another generation or two, and the software needs a lot of work. But you know, we took this Infiltrator demo that we did for GDC last year, or earlier this year. We got that working on an Oculus Rift, and it's amazing. You're walking around this high fidelity environment on a 4 teraflop GPU, and the quality and immersiveness of it is just astonishing. So we're really excited about where that's going, and we expect that that's going to play a major role in the entire industry. But it is still in the research phases now, and we're looking at how that fits into our engine and our games.
Sure.
You know, looking at how to put all that together into a next generation pipeline that's going to go through, you know, if you look at what happened with iPhone over the last 5 generations of phones, I think we're going to see back-to-back revolutionary improvements in the technology, one product after another, as Oculus goes from its current, you know, like ready for developers but not ready for 100 million gamers yet, to being something that absolutely changes the face of gaming. It's going to be really exciting, and we want to be a major part of it.
Now, there's actually something that's not immediately obvious. It's a little frightening from inside Oculus that because all of this is driven by mobile displays, it means we are tied to the mobile development product cycle. And the mobile product cycle is brutal. And it's not like we could even buy the displays and say, well, we don't care about shipping something new this year because they're just not even going to be available for very long after the phones. And that's something that causes a little bit of distress internally where, yeah, it'd be great to ship a new headset every single year, but that's a big commitment.
I also have one more question for Johan. The same kind of question actually that applies to Tim. In the case of Epic, we've seen a lot of support for VR with Unreal Engine and other stuff along those lines. With DICE, so I guess I wonder how much sense it makes for a studio that's a huge studio that makes pretty mainstream games like DICE to jump into something like VR now.
It's a good question. We've been doing quite a lot of experiments for quite some time, a little bit silent about it, but we've been experimenting essentially with our game worlds that we have. And we have some pretty interesting game worlds and with
Something
a
like
lot of different types of
Edge,
interaction. You can imagine something like that?
Good.
No, of just seeing how does it work? What are the mechanics really? Those are the difficult questions. There are well, just as Tim mentioned, all the hard work Johan and company is doing on the hardware side, that's awesome. The rendering side, we have a good trajectory on where we'll be there, but how does it affect our actual animation? If you're a game like Mirror's Edge with first-person animation, how you move, how does that actually feel? That was huge amounts of work to do for the team back in the day for current-gen consoles essentially, but how does that work when you have to look around everything and then run in complex environments? That is something that actually it takes a lot of time, not necessarily as part of the game, but just analyzing these things and getting people familiar within the studio with actual technology and how it changes things. And it's quite surprising amount of things that changes within a game. So that's sort of where we're at, just experiment with things and having all the different disciplines sort of figuring it out.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, my name is Lionel from Argentina. We come a long way. It's a pleasure to have you here. What do you guys think, all of three, about Steam machines and Steam OS? What it adds to the technology?
You know, I mean, Valve is it's an interesting kind of retrospective on it. Valve approached it like at the very beginning of Steam, you know, asking about launch title status and stuff for Doom. Do we want to put Doom 3 on Steam for launch? And we basically said, "Are you crazy? This would be nuts to try to kind of tie yourselves to this little notional digital distribution platform." But clearly, Valve has played a good, strong, long game, and I'm afraid that I may be at that same point right now where I'm like, making your own sort of little console OS, are you crazy? And it may be 10 years from now, they're going to look like brilliant prophets again with it. It still seems a little bit dicey to me. Getting everything moved over to Linux, I'm pushing from that side of things. But given their track record, I'm a little hesitant to be. If it was some other random company, I would be pseudo-scornful, but it's Valve, so I'm not.
What about you, Tim and John?
Yeah, gee, my first impression of that was, wow, trying to build a mainstream platform around Linux is nuts. But I think right now, in terms of market share, month to month sales, Linux is actually the #1 consumer operating system. So it's interesting. I think with Valve, it's not like a Microsoft or Sony launch where there's this $1 billion marketing event and suddenly tens of millions of players show up and it happens. I think Valve is going to look at this, like you said, as a really long-term effort. They're going to build it up over time, and it's going to slowly, But we got a presentation at Epic, where Gabe Newell told us all about the plans for Steam in 2003, and said, it was kind of like, are you crazy about this? But over the next decade, they made it work, and I could really see there's a lot of fear around, from the major publishers and the major developers of being tied down to platforms that are ultimately controlled by Microsoft, Sony, or others. That absolute control over certification is scary, and their control over e-commerce rules out possibilities where we would like to have direct relationships with our customers, and they prevent it. The possibility of Steam Bots as a real, genuinely open platform based on Linux with multiple manufacturers that is jump-started by Valve but isn't absolutely controlled by Valve in the same way that Microsoft and Sony control their platforms. It's very interesting. And I think it will also go a long way towards steering the console manufacturers and pursuing an enlightened path. And I think Sony's been really good in that direction, letting game developers actually access the outside internet on PlayStation 3, for example. Having a platform that's less locked down than is technically possible. And Valve is a great factor in keeping all of them honest. So it's going to be interesting, and you can't judge this over the next 6 months. You have to judge this over the next decade.
I agree also. It will be very interesting to see how the consumer behavior works with it also. I was initially a little bit skeptical about the Steam OS of essentially just the name, Steam OS. You have Steam and it's an operating system built on that. I could see that working, but then Valve's essential commitment towards having it as an open platform there and really going with Linux's strengths, that actually makes it a lot more interesting. It makes it a really quite open environment and an alternative to many of the other more closed platforms there. So, but it will take a long time to see where it's actually going. But I'm initially very positive to it. Also, from a technology point of view, it's quite exciting to lower level access and more open that regard. Also, quite a lot of challenges with that. We're very used to the ecosystems where we're at.
Thank you, guys.
So Sean from Twitter asks me to ask you guys what you think the next visual fluidity challenge is now that tearing and lag are solved, so to speak.
as a last generation guy, I would say I think this solves the monitor problem as well as it can be solved. And the future problem is in the stuff that John and Oculus and the others are working on. That's what you need to go beyond what's possible on a monitor.
One very basic thing also is actually get to that performance. You don't see many games now actually shipping that out of the box with good settings, 100 FPS. Perhaps on the highest end, the graphics cards or with multiple of them, yes, you'll be there, but you want to be there at the $150, $200 type of GPU that people can actually afford. And you want to have that experience for everyone to run your game. As the standard thing would be run at 100 FPS with variable refresh rate, depending on what type of game you're actually doing. But taking that leap forward in our games requires a lot more performance. We need to get that from everyone, from the hardware vendors, from the operating systems, from the way we design our games, from the techniques that we're using. But I think the difference will be quite interesting for actual gamers.
Yeah, so I actually think the pictures that are being made in modern games are really pretty damn good, and in many ways more than adequate for what we're doing in the gaming entertainment side. We can always make things better, and we will make things better. They're going to continue to improve over all these different axes. But my personal belief is that it is time to start pushing for some of these higher frame rate, lower latency things that you can still argue that it's sort of a connoisseur thing where you can just look at it and say, well, the picture's prettier here, I'd rather have this at 30 frames per second. And there will be different classes of consumers, but from my point of view, I think we're already past the knee of the curve, the cost-benefit curve of doing more advanced graphics there, and I'd like to see more efforts spent towards reducing the latency and improving the sort of all-around feedback loop. And I think I/O devices are also a thing, obviously with head-mount displays and various position tracking things that will make larger differences than the next few orders of magnitude spent just on making pixels. Because we know where the better pixels go. It goes to movie rendering. And we have existence proofs of we could spend another 6 orders of magnitude of graphics power, and then we get we get the Avengers scenes rendered in real time, whatever. And that'll be great. But I think that there's other things that we can do with some of that horsepower that might be a little bit more valuable.
I think one of the interesting things, if VR and head-mounted displays are an important part of the future, is if they're going to go to 4 or 8K per eye, you're talking about 16, maybe 32 million pixels rendered at over 100 hertz. And then you're probably going to want to walk around, which is going to make it a little bit hard to carry around your 3-way SLI rig. So you're going to want enough horsepower in a mobile platform to drive 32 million pixels at 100 hertz with really nice pixels at super low latency. So it's going to keep guys like nVidia busy for a long time.
And of course, when you say it, it sounds insane when you just say it like that, but it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It actually will happen, even though it sounds absurd.
I mean, so let's maybe take a little step back. You guys remember Voodoo Graphics? Right, kind of in the dawn of 3D graphics here. That was 45 million pixels a second. Right? We're talking about GPUs these days that have hundreds of pixels per clock at gigahertz clock speeds that are teraflops of floating point performance. John's right. I mean, it's been many orders of magnitude. And so while it sounds nuts to think that you're going to have something that's more powerful than a 3-way Titan SLI rig attached to your face, it's not. It's inevitable, which is crazy, but it's cool.
Okay, my last question is, you guys talk about how you'll be able to develop games differently if you don't have to target a particular frame rate using a technology like G-Sync. But with G-Sync, we're going to be looking at a very small initial user base because it's based on a Kepler GPU and a particular monitor that has a particular hardware chip in it. Pull out the crystal ball again. So is this within the next 5 years that you'll be able to actually forget about a target frame rate with the game and assume that the end user can experience it the way that G-Sync can deliver the gaming experience?
I think this is going to be pretty broadly picked up because this is not like it doubles the size of the die of something to do this. It's not that expensive of a technology. I have no idea what NVIDIA's licensing costs and what are going to be on here, but this is something that should be broadly adopted. From a pure technology standpoint, this is just the right thing. And obviously in early years, this is just going to be a smoothness benefit for people, but in the space of 5 years or something, I would hope something like this is pretty much ubiquitous.
Absolutely. You also, there's a limited amount of things a monitor manufacturer or a TV manufacturer can actually compete on. Once you have
They
4K
put in
pixels,
stupid things in a lot of cases.
exactly.
This is actually a good thing.
Please remove the sharpening, the edge detection, and the motion compensation, and actually add this. And well, 4K pixels would be nice also, and 120 hertz or more. I think there will be, when people actually see it and play it, as you guys have been doing, and more people see that, there will actually be a lot of movement in the overall industry to transition to something like this really quite quickly. And that's what I'm hoping for, because then we can actually, just as say, target games more specifically for this.
Yeah, exactly. The rest of the industry needs to hardware up. Every display device, every platform, including the mobile platforms, we need to adopt this kind of technology over the next few years, because it's visually striking. It doesn't show up in a TV commercial, but it's to any player playing the game, it's incredibly apparent the difference in visual quality here, and so it's got to be a major initiative for everybody, or else people are going to look at it and say, "Oh wow, that looks like the last generation."
And actually, one wish I have there is that while you go into these these retail stores when they sell tons and tons of TV displays or monitors, and you see all of them standing there, really nice monitors, really nice big screen TVs, they look amazing, and all of them are set on actually a startup showroom mode that just cranks up all of the colors. I would like to replace that. Remove that mode. Showroom mode does not exist anymore, and instead just have this variable refresh rate, and you actually see the difference on that. The false colors, you don't want to have that anyway. That's not calibrated to anything that we actually create. It just creates a completely artificial environment. Plus all of the other shit that you're doing there to support legacy content.
Well said.
Hi, my name is Andrew. He actually kind of stole my question a little bit, but so I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little more. Do you think that it's possible that for current games that you're developing, that because it's not going to be picked up right away, could you have a mode enabled where you turn a G-Sync checkmark off in the options, and then you blow us away with more environments? You don't have to sacrifice the frame rate, but you can still kind of touch both sides for now.
Well, I'll answer that in a way that I'll just observe from an industry perspective, and then they can talk to it. And I think, in fact, pretty much every game that ships actually already has that mode. They almost all have settings that when you turn everything on and you turn it up and you turn on AA or TXA and everything on, and then you try to run it on a 4K monitor, even with Titans, it ain't 60 hertz, right? It already exists. Most of these games have settings that push the absolute limits of everything, and then you get in a firefight with 64 guys shooting and explosions, and it is not a 16 millisecond frame. So I think to some degree that already exists. Now, whether they then turn it up to 11, let's let them in.
Well, I guess my question could be more geared toward John over here, because with in Tech 5, especially with Rage, when you introduced that, you really tried to keep that 60 FPS lock. And initially at launch, there were kind of some issues with the pop-in and everything, and obviously that's been, I wouldn't say fixed completely, but it's a lot better now. I think Rage is a very underrated game, by the way.
Yeah, so we had to, there was a lot of pain from the artists not wanting their favorite particle effect to be cut, and you had to be pretty brutal to hit 60 hertz. It is a little unclear of exactly how you would make the cuts if you're still trying to be a 60 hertz game on next gen consoles there. Something like this would certainly let lower end PCs then have play the same settings without falling apart like that. I'm not sure how much you throw in terms of extra additional things. It's hard. It would be like optimizing for a little bit of a niche platform at the beginning, but I think that he's absolutely right that most games already you can just kind of crank them to settings that cause them to want something like this. And Rage did suffer in some ways by not having those extreme moments, by not having the things where we just didn't let the frame rate drop, and it probably the game unquestionably would have been a richer experience if we were able to support some of those. But I felt it was a slippery slope. We let those go in someplace, and then all of a sudden we won't have the smooth frame rate everywhere because those will just be showing up every 10 seconds. So it was there are tough judgment calls to be made with anything like that. But it will be nice if nobody has to fight through those same battles to do you can make the decision that you want a super smooth game, and not have to be quite so dictatorial and decisive about the things that get cut to hit that, because it is, the raster is a very harsh taskmaster there if you always have to hit it, and this is just clearly a better way to have it.
Just a second question. A lot of people outside the industry think that game developers are competitors, but obviously you guys take influences from other people. So I'm just wondering if each of you could mention maybe an influence that you took from one or both of the other people on the panel in the games that they've made.
I mean, certainly looking at the modern slate of things, there's a lot of it was an issue in id Software with so many years between releases on our marquee stuff. And I very much did look at a lot of the Gears of War work going on, and I would point out some of the things like to the artists about, look, they're not making hard-edge seams here, they're wrapping stuff around here, this is not that many polygons, and it comes off as a really well-done world. And I am in awe of all of the titles that get made on the very high end now. It is, I've said before that most people are limited to some degree by sort of the fidelity of their imagination, and what the artists can bring to these big team games really does amaze me, where I literally could not have decades ago predicted what these things are going to look like. I mean, my mind wouldn't think at that level of detail for the intricacies of what's coming together. So I'm extremely proud of the industry. And when I do look at a Gears or a Battlefield, I think they're masters of their craft, and they're doing things at the top of the game, the top of the industry, and they deserve the rewards that they're reaping from all of this. I'm proud to be a peer to the people and the companies that do these products.
I can comment on that also. Both John and Tim have been definitely a massive inspiration in the stuff they've been doing in Concrete, for example, the very early work on virtual texture with Rage, and just the idea of having entire worlds being textured that way. Then that was quite inspiring for us, because we have really large environments as well that we did, for example, for Battlefield 3 back in the day. Although we chose a very different route to do it. It was just the idea that, okay, if you virtual texture everything, you can actually, in our way, it was not necessarily a pure authoring way, it was an optimization, because we can actually cache a lot of data there, and then that's us do more. So we have a virtual texturing system that works a little bit differently. It's more of a procedural texturing system where you composite things. But that was still the ideas come from many areas there, and that was one very concrete thing. And a massive inspiration from Unreal, from our point of view. We had part of our team at DICE working on Mirror's Edge back in the day with Unreal, and that was an awesome game. Doesn't look like most Unreal games do. We managed to create something quite unique with it, and the tool set overall, I think, was really inspiring and motivating for us to continue to develop our own tool sets, also continuing with Frostbite, of just to focus on really great workflows for artists. That's so important, and that was something that Epic guys focused on way earlier than we did.
Thanks. Yeah, gosh, I grew up playing the old computer games. There were some really interesting platform games. Commander Keen came along. I saw that. I was like, wow, that's awesome. I bet I could do that. So I built Joe of the Jungle and upped my programming skills. But when Doom came out, I gave up on programming for a year, because I felt like, okay, this is some unimaginable witchcraft. I'll never be able to do that. It took a while to get back into it after that, but I did. It's just really cool to see so many advances come along that you realize could have been done any time in the last decade or two, but nobody had really thought of it at that point. The first game I built, ZZT, was this very simple text-based game, but it included a level editing tool. And tens of thousands of kids grew up building ZZT levels. I keep running into them at GDC, telling them how they were playing my game when they were 3 years old, and reminding me how old I am. But to see like Minecraft come out recently, I thought that ZZT was this sweet spot of trade-offs that couldn't be matched in the modern 3D graphics era. But then Notch comes along, and Minecraft does exactly that, building this really awesome looking game. It's also a construction kit that's enabled tens of millions of new gamers to grow up and express their creativity there. And the kids are growing up now, and 20 years from now they'll tell Notch how old he is. So it's just cool to see these innovations come along surprisingly. Just NVIDIA's technology that's been debuted here. This is something that could have been done any time in the last decade, but we just got to the point now where the stars lined up and it's been implemented, and we see the dramatic improvement it provides.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel from Chile. In some places like my country, the politician and traditional media is still combating and criticizing the video game. Even today, with video game making $1 billion at the video game industry. What do you think about this problem, the society to violence in the video games?
Yeah, obviously I've been fielding that question for 20 years.
I know, thank you.
Yeah, and I always say it's like the people that think this, in an abstract sense, you think, well, yeah, surely it's got to have some impact there that, but the question of whether it's a cathartic release or some kind of an impetus towards it is clearly debatable. But if you actually go and hang out with the hardcore gaming crowd, I always say, come down to a QuakeCon and see the people that do spend all their lives playing these games, and they're probably not the people that that you think. So I would never dismiss the possibility that there is some correlation there, but that gets all the way down into political rabbit holes about how you want to be controlling your citizens in society. I have no sympathy for the argument that we should do something about any of this. I'm not convinced that there is a positive correlation, and I'm not convinced that even if there was, that it would be correct to try to take some action based on it.
I think also it's quite easy to just look at, well, at least in general, look at the age of the people that are saying those statements. That age is just going further and further up. There will be a time when they do not exist. It's actually people that start playing games, sort of my generation or younger than that also, they don't stop playing games. I can't play the same games I played back in the day. I would never have the patience for the Nintendo 8-bit type of games nowadays. When we relaunched Battlefield 1942 on the Origin, entire studio just started playing that, and it's, oh my god, we can't play this anymore. This requires too much patience to walk across the entire thing. I've changed the entire. Well, a lot of people have changed. Some people may not have changed and still love it. It's still an awesome game. But everything, sort of, people don't stop playing games generally, and the people that think that violent video games is a massive problem in society, they're just going to
Yeah, the folks who didn't grow up with the technology often look at the new entertainment medium as threatening. There's a big campaign to stop this new violent entertainment medium being exposed to youth with comic books in the 1920s. I'm sure the ancient Greeks were like, oh, that Homer guy, he's totally ruining our kids. I think we have to also realize that this is a form of artistic expression, and it's absolutely protected, and it's absolutely essential to the development of everybody's views of the world, and so we should embrace it, both the positives and the negatives.
I think that there are so many different experiences that can be given from games, and indie games is a great example of that, of just a wide variety of types of games you can have. We were just talking earlier today about the Papers, Please, which is a really awesome small indie game where you're just a border guard in Eastern Europe, and you have to approve if people are able to go through or not go through. You have to check them. It's a very uncomfortable game, but it's a really interesting, weird experience sitting there. I did that for half an hour, and I felt I didn't feel good, but it was a good feeling. It was a really interesting feeling that I can only get from an interactive game in that regard. And sure, there were controversial things about that from an entire political point of view, and there are things that, that's not probably a game for everyone. But those type of experiences, even if they are uncomfortable, can sometimes be good. Also, there's the entire spectrum of things.
Hi. Next year we've got Mobile Kepler. nVidia say it's more powerful graphically than the PlayStation 3. So I'm curious, when do you think it'll be viable that we'll have games like Gears of War, Battlefield, Rage on a smartphone or a tablet?
So I'm actually spending most of my time right now working on an Android platform. I mean, there's some interesting quirks about I'm able to do some rendering directly to a front buffer on a certain Android platform in a way that I can't on any of the PC stuff. I'm twisting arms to try and get some of this addressed right now. So I have a lot of real current experience, and there's still, you know, a huge gap where the best mobile GPU now is still less than a tenth of what a pretty decent PC is. You know, for the last couple of years, they've all been talking about console level performance, and they're still not really there. I mean, even the latest and greatest isn't as powerful as the current Xbox 360, but it's a tremendous slope that they're on. There's a lot of other challenges in the mobile space, even aside from the raw horsepower. Like I've been commenting how if you look at an nVidia Shield, the GPU and CPU are pretty potent, but if you play the games on there, it still drops some frames and has some hitches and things, and that winds up being due largely to power management on these platforms, where you've got this very tight battle between performance and power, and it comes off as hitching in frame rates, which you think would be a wonderful thing to have on all those little Android platforms. So the real question is going to be, obviously, you play different games on mobile than you play when you're sitting down at your desktop or your living room. But the prospect of like AirPlay and docking and the other things about, will we eventually wind up with your only computation device being some mobile thing and then some cloud assets? And there's some cogent arguments can be made that might be an optimal sweet spot. You know, but as far as seeing the latest Battlefield whatever on on mobile, it's still a long ways off. I mean, there's things like, it's great you can do a UE4 demo on mobile, but there's some curtains that people are not, it's not like you just compile for mobile on that. But it is extremely potent. And I think that obviously more games are being played on mobile than any other platform. They're not the long-term devote your life to them, but more people are tapping on the mobile screens and are tapping on joypads or mouse buttons. So it is very interesting. It's been interesting to see the games that have evolved there. But I don't think that, probably we're going to see a slight slowing in the rate of increase of GPU power, because they've been trading out die size growth for a while, and we're kind of approaching some limits and we're approaching a lot of power limits, thermal limits based on that. But the current torrid pace of growth will probably slow somewhat, but it's still going to have a ton of additional progress. And I am going to be really, really happy if nVidia can capture some significant market share with essentially Kepler on that, because I know I'm working with a lot of the mobile vendors right now on some of the GPU stuff, but nVidia just has a development relations and tools and driver team that is it's better than anybody else. I mean, it's probably better than everybody else in the industry put together, and it would be nice to get that level of support on some of the mobile GPUs.
No, you don't need support on some other guys. It's fine. Tim, Johan, you guys have a perspective?
Yeah, so we do a lot of experiments, and one of the issues that we're facing a little bit is it's not necessarily from a technical point of view. We're getting there, and we're actively working on mobile platforms to prepare Frostbite for it, experiment with, see what we can do with current architectures and future architectures, and do various experiments and pure porting and adaptation there. But there are quite a few questions there. Even if you could play from a technology point of view, just play your traditional game that you can play on a console. Well, the input devices are so massively different. The business model is so different. Expectations from a user is so different also. So, in our view, we like to see it more of okay, come up with the different types of game concepts and what type of game ideas do we have, and that may fit on in the mobile spaces. One problem though is that we have so many game teams that are trained to been working on the console and the PC mindset for such a long time. So it's difficult to break out and do these really small type of games that still has engineering value there. There are lots and lots of stuff that could be done, and I think we'll probably start seeing a little bit of a hybrid type of game. Some games that are perhaps a little bit more of the traditional console experience on tablet, for example, perhaps not cell phone, but too small. But and some of those will be really awkward, and some may fit really well. It's sort of you need the there will probably be this type of halo moment when you found that, okay, you can actually play a first-person shooter with a gamepad, but you need that for a tablet, and there'll probably be a couple of those. I'm not specifically talking about first-person shooters, although that is interesting as well, but they're likely to be for different type of genres where you have that, okay, this works. You don't just need to click verbs with your single finger. That's pretty low bandwidth input device. But you can do more, but I don't know about what all of those halo moments will be. But that's really exciting, actually. And having the technology being powerful enough, both on the GPU and the overall CPU, and hopefully also memory systems. That's usually a major bottleneck on mobile and even down to laptops. We simply have the compute, but you don't have the bandwidth. But it feels like we're getting into a trajectory there where it should not be the hardware's fault, it should be our fault if we can't figure out cool game ideas or game concepts to run on that. So hold us accountable.
Yeah, I think NVIDIA coming in with Kepler on mobile devices is going to be a really important thing for the whole industry. Of course, it's a great hardware architecture. It brings DirectX 11 features there, and that's all much needed. But NVIDIA's unsung hero is the quality of its drivers. And this is something that's really lacking throughout the rest of the industry. The quality is there, but the performance overhead is really severe. You know, on a lot of platforms we're losing a factor of 3 or 4 in the performance we could get just in the driver overhead. You know, so we've been taking some of the next generation game prototyping work we've been doing, and the only mobile platform we're able to run it on is NVIDIA's new hardware they're working on. Mobile targeted hardware that has a driver that's super efficient, that can actually run a game developed for PC and console platforms, and it has a driver that's fast enough to do that. The hardware in a lot of the other devices is fully capable of that level of GPU performance, but they're losing it all in software. And NVIDIA is going to play a great role in pushing everybody in the right direction there. We're very happy to see it, and we're really looking forward to seeing increased competition on that front. You know, it's important with these systems not to just look at the GPU and what's the GPU's performance, but you have to look at how that's balanced with all of the other components of the system. And that's where the real major opportunities are. It's improving the whole system level performance by optimizing all the parameters and making sure they're well tuned against each other.
Is CPU power, memory bandwidth, expanding quickly enough to accommodate a GPU architecture like Kepler?
Now, I'd say it used to be like in the old days, it was always exciting talking to Intel coming down, talking about new stuff as we were getting important things like FPUs and 32-bit address space and things like that. But it's been years since I've actually really cared, because they're doing a good job. They're chugging along, giving us better processing at lower power, and it seems like that's one of those things that I just don't have to pay attention to anymore because it seems pretty adequate. I don't think there's a lot left on the table that somebody's just not exploiting on the CPU side. I mean, yes, I'm dearly looking forward to the day when we get some, quantum nanotechnology, whatever that gets us 50 gigahertz CPUs, but I'm not holding my breath for it. And I think that it's sort of proceeding apace right now.
Another aspect of that, when it comes to mobile specifically, I think you see that there's a lot of vendors out there all about with very varying graphics architectures, and I think you'll see it's kind of unclear exactly what is the best type of model for a mobile chipset, for your overall graphics pipeline there that balances memory bandwidth that you have. Will it be good increases in bandwidth, then other algorithms becomes available, or otherwise we may have to switch the pipeline quite significantly, both in hardware and in software, in order to really create amazing experiences on that. So that's something we're quite actively talking with nVidia and with other vendors about, of just seeing where there's that spot, and it will take quite some time to really have all that sort of settle down, and that's good. It's awesome to have a competitive. Well, I don't know how many companies there are actually competing on mobile on the actual hardware. There probably will be more in the future, plus then will probably be less in the future of seeing what actually survives from that and helping to push that in a couple of different directions from different types of games and applications in general. So there's a massive open space there.
Yeah, I think memory bandwidth seems to be in good balance as long as you're using your mobile device as it's built. But once you start beaming your mobile scene to a large display device like a television, then you're going to want a whole lot more. Because a lot of the techniques we're using for deep frame buffers, for high dynamic range, and really advanced compositing techniques just aren't translatable quite yet to a mobile platform. Though they work, technically. It's just too slow due to the bandwidth limitation. So it's going to be really interesting. Bandwidth also translates to power right now. So these new technologies like die stacking, as well as new memory architectures are going to be very interesting.
Thanks for your time.
Looks like we're going to be here for a little while longer. Let me take a bathroom break.
Absolutely. So, by the way, is there logistics-wise? I'm doing a time check here. I think it's, it's 2:30.
Hey guys, just 1 second. This is Jensen. Hey John, don't go. Hold it for just a second. It turns out I've got to go catch a flight. I didn't want to take off without thanking you guys properly. You guys not only made the show, made the launch. You guys made our year. I mean, it is quite a privilege to have you guys anywhere, but to have the three of you guys in the same place at the same time and having this kind of access to you guys is really, really a privilege. It's a privilege for me. I know it's a privilege for everybody in the audience, and it's just so much fun to listen to you guys. I want to thank you guys for everything you've done for the game industry, but not just the game industry, for the computer industry, the technology industry, and just good old-fashioned human beings in general. Okay, I think you guys are fantastic. I love you guys, love your friendship, and love your partnership. Thanks for everything.
All right, Tony. You guys keep going. These guys don't want you to stop.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we'll just keep going. We can if we need to take breaks, we'll take breaks around and stuff like that. So fire away, man.
You kind of stole my last question a bit, but piggybacking on that, can you guys comment on the future of the PC desktop as a gaming platform moving forward? 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
I see a pretty bright future, actually. This is a great technology in the right direction for PC. There's really no experience that can be comparable to having a really high-powered PC with 120 hertz screen, especially with using type of thing. Having games played that way, and also having the type of quite open and very collaborative ecosystem that you can have on PC. I really like it. So going forward, I'm not sure. It depends a little bit. I do see a use for, typically in these type of conversations, people get stuck on, okay, so free-to-play is going to take over everything, mobile will take over everything, yeah. It's so black and white. I see a great use for all of these things. You've seen massive adoption of tablets, and iPads and Android tablets and all that, but most of those are used for just consumption. That's starting to change a little bit, and that's a very welcome change. While on your PC, it's truly a really general machine that you use for everything, and people use it for everything. I actually have my main PC I have at home. I use it both on a large 30-inch screen that I play my first-person shooters on, or sit on my desk and actually work when I'm at home. And I just take the same PC and switch it over to a 100-inch projector and sit on my sofa, and it's exactly the same machine. That's probably not a common setup, and it requires a specific type of very small apartment that I have. But there's very few platforms you can do the same thing with. And PC really enables that.
Yeah, I've always looked at the PC as kind of the pinnacle platform of the industry. It's the place where you can do everything, including serious work. You can play games. You can play games and buy GPU hardware that's faster than anything else you can buy on any other platform, right? How many teraflops can you put on a PC now? It's about 15 teraflops.
You could actually do it, so you can do 20.
20 teraflops in a single PC. That's always, by the very nature of the PC being open and expandable, going to be far above what any fixed platform will be able to achieve. And we're now increasingly using mobile devices in our life, but when we need to do real serious work, we always go back to our PCs. And many serious types of gaming, if you're playing League of Legends or any of these other games that require really intense communication, have a built-in sense of community. Even if you're a console gamer, you're going on to online forums and talking to people on your PC. So everything we do tends to gravitate around PC, and it can get a little bit depressing as the PC market ebbs and flows. Around 2005, at the beginning of the last console generation, the PC was in a really depressing space. The quality of drivers there was just really abysmal. It was very hard to go out and buy a game and get it working on your hardware. That's really changed dramatically. Nowadays, things generally work. Even the lowest end Intel integrated graphics laptop you can go out and buy, it works. And that's a great thing for nVidia and the whole industry, because it means that, you can start with that, your game works, you can play it, you can realize, I need more, and then go out and buy a better PC or a bigger GPU and continually upgrade from there. But the very fact that the whole thing works is critically important. I think it's going to be a really big driver in the growth of the PC as a gaming platform. And we get attracted to shiny things. I think other platforms come and go. I think smartphones and tablets are here forever because that form of computing is going to always be attractive, but it's purely a content consumption tool. And when we go to really participate deeply in complex games or sit down and for a long experience or go to build a game as developers or do engineering on our computers or anything else serious, it's always going to be on a computer of some sort.
I think also looking at it a little bit longer term, one of the things we'll probably start to see is that the distinction will blur a little bit also. There's a lot of things that interoperability between your cell phone and your tablet and your PC. When I'm at home, I may be just quickly checking on my cell phone and see an email, but then I want to type a response. So either can sit there just next to my PC and type a response on this tiny device. Often I do that, but if I want to do something, if I really want to start writing or need to look up more information, I have to go to my PC and I sort of have to reset. I have to, I have to log in with my VPN, or I have to sort of Outlook, or I have to go in on these various websites. Well, when I'm holding my cell phone with the information of my email there, why can't I just, they're actually close to each other there, why can't they just communicate and I directly see that email so I can start writing on my PC, because I wanted to sit down and do 30 minutes of serious time of actually writing a good response. You can do this today, but it's not streamlined. So I think those things will become, sort of float together a little bit. So it's essentially just different form factors. It makes sense to have a small electronic device in your pocket that's with you at all times. It also makes sense to have a casual device that's a little bit larger that you can have when you're sitting in your sofa or when you're traveling and use a little bit more. And it makes sense to sit down in front of a desk and actually use a larger screen. But then also, some of these devices, sort of like what John was hinting at before also, is, if your tiny electronic device that you have in your pocket, if that's actually can project up on the 100-inch projector or the 30-inch screen, and you get your 4K experience on those things, and you can actually do things there. Is it the PC then? Just because you get the PC experience, but it's in your pocket. Would you call that a PC, or would that be your phone? You're sitting working on your phone on your 30-inch screen. It will probably start blurring these things, and it will be different use cases for different users. If my primary target is working with email and doing some browsing, doing YouTube, that's not me. But there's a lot of people that consume media and do the basic stuff. Then for them, it will be a lot sooner that they will get that experience from their phone being integrated into everything. For the higher end, and that's the awesome thing about PC, just as Tim said, then there will be still, I want a dedicated gaming experience that actually gives me everything, or at least something better than what you can allow in your pocket without worrying about it.
So John, the question was basically what's the future of the PC as a gaming platform?
So there's obviously lots of different directions that things can go. In many ways, I look at the PC as sort of it's the muscle car and hot rod of gaming, where you've got the people that just want their Honda Civic and they've got a shiny phone or whatever that's providing the experience, or a prepackaged console. Clearly the PC ecosystem has warts on it. There are challenges and problems, but the fact that you can put together that system back there with 3 monster GPUs and 3 4K graphics cards, the fact that you can do that it's not, you don't need to be a conglomerate with a research lab on there. You can just kind of go down to Price or whatever and buy the cards and buy the systems and plug them all together. That's pretty awesome. And the fact that you can then do the experiences at the high end that at times are almost a decade ahead of what you could do on the console. You could sort of see into the future a little bit for what people on other platforms will see, because you have that opportunity to trade money and convenience for an experience that you just literally cannot do any other place. Whether it becomes, but there's the possibility that something like, whether it's a Steam box or something like that, that could become, again, it's hard for me to imagine it as a likely scenario, but it's not inconceivable that something like that could take over and be the most cost-effective way for people to be doing all their computing needs, and it might be good enough to handle something like that. So you could see a PC-like ecosystem conceivably taking back over the living room and kicking out the consoles. I mean, I really wouldn't hazard to guess any of these. I mean, I think there's enough inertia behind the consoles that they will be successful to a large degree, almost without question. But how things turn out as they begin to age and they get a little bit long in the tooth, and the PCs are clearly more powerful, while perhaps getting some of the, if you've got like a nice Steam ecosystem that gives you several of the things that the consoles do some things right, and there are things that the PC suffers in comparison. But if the PC starts addressing those things and developers have a preference for a more open platform, you can imagine scenarios where that works out pretty positively. At this point, obviously Oculus is very tied to the PC space for what we're doing. I think eventually we'll have a mobile component for it. We can't say when it's going to be like that, but the PC environment is what's going to be driving all of these things. I mean, Microsoft or Sony wouldn't approve an Oculus plugged-in device to a console. There's really no opportunity if you want to do something off the beaten path like that. So you can say that a lot of the innovative things will happen there. A lot of the crazy I/O devices and things that people will be experimenting with. But the large-scale sort of macro economic trends in the PC, I have no idea. I really don't know. It's been exciting to see it where the PC, it looked like in many cases it was sort of dying off, and it's in a renaissance now with all the development that does go on, and Steam's been a really important part of it.
I like also that the PC has moved from being this gray box that you have to something that looks like an ultrabook. Well, partially, and then you have nice large black boxes with lots of nice graphics cards, and also there's actually been quite an evolution there. It's not the boring classic
Yeah, I mean, I
dull
guess,
boxes been before.
yeah, I mean, I guess you don't really need to, or I don't think you need to think about an or is really in there. I think that they can all exist and they all have their place. And I've got consoles at home, I've got PCs at home, I've got tablets at home, I've got phones at home, and I can play on all of them. And they're good at different things, and there's warts in different ways on all of them. And I think the openness of all of the PC is exciting and it allows for innovation, but that's also part of its warts. But you kind of, I don't know that if you try to fix all of those, warts on the PC, it looks like something different. And I think that we've got decades of education and history saying that, there's some of those things, the openness and the flexibility of the PC is what makes a PC. And whether that PC's, a Falcon, or a Falcon Northwest Tiki box with a Titan in it, or whether it's a Razer Blade notebook, or whether it's an integrated, iMac, or whether it's something even more mobile. I mean, I think that's cool, and that's helped makes a PC what it is, and it seems to be, alive and well.
Now, there is another very important platform issue that's particularly relevant to G-Sync here, and that's cloud gaming in various ways, where, it's interesting where a lot of people think it's very out of character for me. I'm all about latency and turnaround, that I still think cloud gaming is going to be very important because it has such immense convenience factors in some ways. And G-Sync is something that will be very, very useful for that, because right now they all tear horribly because they've already got enough latency. You don't want to add more for it, and that's something that will be particularly valuable there. And I had made this comment several years ago looking at the various platforms that obviously you start integrating all of this in, and if you were integrated into the monitor, then you wouldn't have to be V-Sync bound, but now that can even be pulled out with this level of technology. And how the PC fits in as a source of streaming gaming towards like a shield, or as a destination from some grid engine thing. It's that still obviously hasn't taken off in a big way, but I think in many ways it is an inevitability to capture some significant fraction of the gaming space.
I think one thing that, well, there haven't really been that many people talking about this, but the potential future you could see also that only the PC could do is that the amount of devices I have at home, both amount of PCs, amount of laptops, amount of different types of screens is quite immense. And I have a tiny home, we're just two people. a lot of people have larger families and even more devices scattered everywhere. You could see a future where it's getting quite awkward to have all these completely independent boxes. They're essentially just form factors. What would be ideal in some cases, it doesn't solve everything, but it could be quite interesting in some cases, is that just have a single server at home where I can play my games on Steam on my big projector with a gamepad, where I can scroll at the same time from this central server. I can, well, someone can be playing a game on an ordinary monitor, or my tiny phone type of device that have been taken over by this essentially larger server that is my server, that where I have everything. And it's a PC that's hidden away, that just wirelessly connects to all of these things. Because then you can get to a point of view where, well, the thing I was talking about, the sort of the seamless experience with all of these different form factors. Between a day, I switch between all these things quite frequently. And you can see the same thing within an office also. That's really an interesting type of future, where more dumb devices, because there's so many different types of devices, and there's so many different types of form factors that make sense for different cases, but all of them now are very standalone, which makes sense, I guess, if you're traveling and bringing your phone with you, but yeah, at home it would be interesting. Yeah, that's a very different future.
Awesome, thanks guys.
4K versus G-Sync. What is more important to gaming?
G-Sync.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we will always be able to suck up more resolution, but right now people migrate to 4K and they get much lower frame rates on the experience, and I think the trade-off's already a little bit south of optimal that people are making now, and quadrupling down on that, yeah, I don't think, while the G-Sync will just make everything somewhat better.
So after you use G-Sync, you don't want to go back to anything else?
Well, I've got the whole issue about the low persistence displays that I have to deal with on the head-mounted display systems. But I think that for a conventional desktop monitor, I really want to see this just absolutely ridiculous.
The good news is it doesn't have to be or there either.
Yes, it's a shame that those 4K monitors back there are not G-Sync, because you see them juddering and tearing at exactly the problems we've been talking about now. It's actually almost an object lesson there, and it's a shame that we don't have those G-Sync.
We're working on it. We're working on it. I see 4K as kind of a workstation application for the next few years, right? In that time frame, we'll be using those monitors for building games, because we want to have a huge set of complex tools open. Photographers will be using it for their work, videographers. Lots of people will be using it, but I don't think it's the right output resolution for rendering until your GPUs get significantly faster at consumer levels. Like once that 20 teraflops is in a single GPU, costing $300, that's when you want to go 4K. It's when you can sustain 30 to 60 to 90 frames a second.
And actually, just to roll up with that, the environment where I work, just on my own desk, I essentially have, well, I guess it's 4 portrait mode, 24-inch screen, and a 4K screen next to that. And they're putting them in half circle around you. It's actually a really good work environment, workspace. So having a single 4K screen that's curved and 50-inch or something like that would actually replace 4 of my screens, and would be an amazing work environment for that. And I probably could definitely play games in an extremely immersive way there also. And you're starting to see these curved OLED screens in that size. So add G-Sync on it and increase to 120 Hz. You have perfect gaming and perfect workstation.
While we're at it, I want spherical section screens so that everything focuses properly on the heads also.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Hi guys. Jensen's gone, right? I wanted to ask what you guys thought of Mantle, just to see, since you guys are considered luminaries and large developers, what do you guys think?
Oh, the M word. You guys can start?
Okay, I mean, my opinion on it is, in terms of action items, there's a question, should NVIDIA have a response to Mantle? And I think that's unequivocally no. They should, it would be, I think, a horrible mistake if some reason, somehow NVIDIA got panicked by this and made some lower level NVIDIA API. You already have very good low level access through the GPU extensions that NVIDIA has always rolled out, ahead of anywhere else. Give you as much performance as you want to trade the inconvenience of doing NVIDIA proprietary stuff on them. Now, Mantle is, AMD has talked many times in the past about close to the metal type architectures, and it only ever became interesting because of their dual console wins. If it was just a way to do on the PC, be a little bit more, lower level for them, I couldn't have cared less. The landscape does matter, that they have both the major console wins with a similar architecture that you can get on the PC. Developers will be making systems architectural changes that favor those. So I think it's not a stupid thing for AMD to be doing at this point. There are some benefits that they can reap from it. It could have implications for Steam box type things there. But they're probably if Microsoft and Sony both embraced it, that would be very, very powerful for AMD, but it doesn't look like they're going to, at least Microsoft, with the words that they're mouthing now.
Sure.
So I mean, if I was still doing all of the, all of the major technology coding for next gen game stuff, I probably would not be embracing Mantle right now. But there would be days when it would be extremely tempting. But when I would dispassionately step back and look at it, I probably wouldn't come down on the side of saying it's worth the effort there. But obviously, others come to different conclusions.
Sure. There are some good ideas in Mantle. We really liked the idea of having low-level, low-overhead access to the GPU. I mean, if you look back at what's in both DirectX and OpenGL, there's a lot of overhead in those APIs and the multiple layers of them, and the fact that they date back to the old SGI model of hardware rendering, which is very, very different than a modern shader-based programming model that we have now. Where you have potentially unified memory and a lot of processing power available in the GPU and lots of ways of sharing data that go beyond just calling a ton of API functions for every little thing you want to do. So there are good ideas there. I hope that really helps the OpenGL committee and Microsoft shape their future APIs. I mean, if you ask me would I much prefer to have a low-level API for accessing the GPU, the answer is yes, but 5 of them, each for different hardware architectures and vendors and operating systems, absolutely not. That is the wrong direction for the industry to go. And to have yet another API in the PC that's still different than the standard PC DirectX API, and it's different than the OpenGL ES that exists on Mac and Android and iOS, and it's different than the PlayStation 4's low-level rendering API, and it's different than what Microsoft provides in Xbox. I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, so... one of the key things about it is, and one of the main reasons we're doing it is that it's not a replacement. It's not designed that way at all. The idea is that we can solve some of the long-term problems that we've actually been having on the PC as a platform. All the stuff we've been talking about today of getting really robust performance, consoles type of robust, stable performance. Those are things we can experiment and work with Mantle. We do that with D3D and we do that with GL also, of course. This is another avenue you could see. It's also really interesting of just essentially opening up something that we're quite familiar with already. We've been spending, essentially the last 2 years working on the next-gen consoles, and the architectures are the same. We're intimately familiar with those architectures, and it's a good fit there, just as John described. And I see, even though we're not done with our work with it, and it's definitely not done yet either to be shipped out, I still see it as a success even right now, actually, just because of these conversations and the amount of things that actually, the amount of developments and the amount of sort of both enthusiasm and even the opposite of enthusiasm, all of the type of, it's been a bit stale, you could say, especially in the PC graphics space. Microsoft, they switched focus for quite some time over to other things, which they probably really did need to do. But I think now, going forward, it's a really exciting opportunity, both on the PC space and the stuff we're experimenting with Mantle and what we're learning on the consoles, but also on mobile, as we discussed before, okay, what should be the future graphics pipelines there? There's a lot of movement in all of these things, and it's just good to have lots of different avenues to experiment and actually, hopefully, deliver concrete value in these things. But I completely agree with both John and Tim that if NVIDIA would do their own API, and then Intel would do an API, and then Qualcomm would do an API, that's not the future we want to be. That would be a bad future. That would be a lot of work. Microsoft and Kronos does play an important part of all of this, and I hope Mantle will be quite influential in in many of these aspects also. And what we're doing right now, also specifically with AMD, is just a start.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and you've used the API where we've just read the spec or the marketing materials. What would you say is so 2 questions. What do you think is the cost, like in man years or whatever, of implementing manual support in Battlefield? And what do you think is the ultimate gain on PC? Like, could you try to quantify that?
It is too early to quantify. We've been very busy just making sure our game works overall and actually shipping it out. We're almost done with it. So it's too early to say. We'll have a lot more information in November, mid-November, when we'll talk more about it, and it will be interesting to see. I think it's important also to, one thing that people that are not developers, it can be difficult to understand that when it comes to bottlenecks, it's not like the bottleneck. Okay, we solved this one, we're done, go home, and the game runs well. Bottlenecks is like whack-a-mole. You fix one, and then you thought that was the thing, you made that 4 times faster, and then the next bottleneck shows up after 10% of that improvement.
And of course, the biggest issue is that really you have to architect your large-scale vision to take maximum advantage of things.
Yeah.
No API just all of a sudden really makes a dramatic difference on things, because if you built a good game engine to any API, even if you magically made all that API overhead vanish, it doesn't make that much of a difference. It's the possibility of doing. I mean, there's stuff on the GCNs that that I'm very excited about. Some of the asynchronous pipeline queues for different things that would be great to to take direct control over them. But then that's, you either design for that or you don't design for that.
Yeah, it will be a gradual approach also of, sure, we're doing in Battlefield 4, it's not like Battlefield 4 is only dedicated for a specific API and a specific platform. It's a rich game there. You want to work with something and deliver concrete benefits and evaluate and then go forward and see where we are. And hopefully in the future we'll design games based on many of the concepts that we're proving out a lot earlier now than what we can do otherwise. And I think that's actually a good change for the entire industry, even though people sometimes do get stuck up on like the overall thing, thinking again, the same discussion as I had before of, okay, it's mobile will replace all of PC. No, that will not happen. Same, Mantle will not replace all of DX or all of DL. That they're complementary. Well, actually, when you use Mantle, it's not complementary. That is complementary in the actual industry overall. And you want that competitiveness, not necessarily by having 5 different APIs, but having movement. I think that's really, really interesting.
Cool. I think so. I appreciate it a lot.
Can you tell us how much they pay for you to use it?
Well, actually,
let's leave that one alone.
No. I can answer a couple of questions. They wouldn't have to pay us anything to use it. I've been pitching these type of ideas for many, many years for every single vendor, and it's actually talking just about my own egoistic view of solving my own specific problems is that we see a lot of stalls, we see a lot of performance gone missing in many areas that we actually want to get at that performance. We want to learn how to program a machine on a lower level that has actually a really, really good architecture for that. And I think that's something that will sort of roll out going forward also.
Okay, so it's good as an R&D platform for developers to experiment with. And Johnny, you were talking about the desire to have front buffer access or something like that. A lower level API would be more likely to provide that. I think it's also good if it pushes Microsoft and the OpenGL folks to improve their drivers by realizing that, hey, you can actually achieve a lot more performance on PC with some more low-level techniques. I think it would only be bad if the outcome of this is that now we have to deal with 5 vendor-specific APIs for all the different GPUs.
Yeah. And also the vision for Mantle, well, it can play out many ways. You can't really say for sure. But the vision for Mantle is that it can become an open API also. That's something we're completely open for, and that's something AMD is open for also. It's just that that's not the right way to go at it initially. There are those avenues already with Cronus and with DCP. This is
if it
us
worked
trying
as an
something
open
else.
API, it wouldn't be a low-level API.
Well, actually, I don't fully agree. Sure, you can make an API that's completely down to the level, sort of what you like on PStream. We worked. It was a very, very thin abstraction now, but it was completely specific with that architecture. I do think the way modern GPUs work is quite different from how the DX or absolutely GL design was from the beginning. There are extensions, at least in GL land, where you can access many things, but there are commonalities between all architectures, like bindings, for example. That's an awesome thing that nVidia's been working on with GL. That is really the future for all GPUs. And if you ask the different vendors, even vendors perhaps on mobile space that do not have it yet, they agree that it is the future. Well, now I'm talking for all mobile vendors.
Well, yeah,
probably not, but
I mean,
overall,
you know,
it makes sense as a modern design for that. And you see some convergence towards things that are generally good design. And then some designs will come a little bit later for that, but when it's a great fit for key hardware and it's a great fit for developers, then I think, well, that's the way it will go.
Like my point about unified memory is absolutely here, and we really need to get down to GPUs are just peers on the same memory pool as the CPU, and we really need like documented texture layouts.
And that's another thing, that everything is becoming SoCs also. So even the GPU is a combination of tons of different processors. There's a significant amount of processors, either if it's an nVidia GPU or if it's an AMD GPU. There's quite a lot of quite independent engines there. And that's something that's hidden from us now. The GPU is something that from the CPU, you prepare your commands, you just give it to them, and it has a driver that tries to figure out which goes where. And that's just generally good design to expose those things a little bit more
Like if you're
closely.
trying to do something picky, like using the hardware video decompression stuff, or then re-encoding there, you have to invent a brand new API to get that captured.
Or even things like compute, for example. Compute is, well, one of the best use cases of compute is for graphics, which is kind of, it feels a little bit weird, but it's not like you want to use it both tightly coupled with your graphics, and you want to use it completely separately that the CPU drives for low latency stuff, and you want to have background tasks that have can have really high latency and run in the background and just eat up whatever vector units that are free on your GPU. That's also generally good design for any
Even
type
in the
of system.
GPU space, I'm hitting on these issues where I want GPU task scheduling, and we have no concept of prioritization between GPU SKUs, where we need to be able to specify time slices and priorities, and it's down to being a CPU scheduler for a finite resource.
And it will likely take quite a lot of time until we find a convergence to a definite model there. But in the meantime, it's good to have a couple of models, both from hardware and from software, sort of competing or being tested there, and see what comes out of all that. Because I do think there will be quite an interesting convergence there.
So there's clearly a large amount of enthusiasm in the panel for G-Sync. Is it thus fair to say that you'll be playing the games that you're developing on nVidia hardware from this point onwards?
Well, that's a nice question. Well, if nVidia, they have G-Sync, they have, well, I have to say they have good GPUs. We don't have Mantle. It starts getting a little bit tricky. In my view, yeah, nVidia had Mantle and we had G-Sync, or we had, ideally all vendors should have all of those. That would be the best solution, that would be the best solution for the industry. But I think what you're seeing, if you look at it from a practical point of view, you'll have first mover advantages for the companies that invest R&D effort and actually bring something out there. So I'll play the game on both.
So
for various reasons.
Is the G-Sync software side of things and hardware side on the card, is that going to be licensable to like our Intel and AMD going to be able to?
Yeah, we haven't precluded the notion of it. Frankly, we're first trying to get it going.
Yeah.
Get the ecosystem going, get the display guys going. We had to change the GPU architectures, get it going, and then we haven't precluded anything in the future.
That sounds like a software API I've been thinking about.
Yeah, if only that pesky GCN thing. I'm just kidding. I don't know, Tim, John?
Yeah, well, we primarily use nVidia hardware at Epic, and we buy less of it.
That's no surprise.
I've got a light boost monitor on my desktop, so it'll probably update to a G-Sync.
Yeah, I heard my voice called out. We got the voice of God over here telling us. One more question.
Anyone else? Still on line? Do you want to?
Here we go.
So, if there's anything in the game industry that you guys would hold your breath for like a decade, I would say, what would that be?
Yeah, I think that probably all of us are building the future that we want to see. That's the greatest part about being sort of a technologist, is that when we think something's important enough, we set about trying to make it happen. I guess on some of these things it is nagging hardware vendors for doing things, but sometimes it's rolling up our sleeves and just kind of working on the important things ourselves.
Yeah, the industry is really in an awesome position now. It feels like, there are engines like the Unreal Engine pushing the high end really hard, and then there are engines like Unity bringing in users, from all over the place and forming the foundation of indie development today. It's a great time to be a game developer, and with distribution systems like Steam and just the ability to distribute stuff yourself on the web, it's a great time. You can, without having to deal with the publisher and retail, do an enormous amount of game building and game distribution and build a company now. The way I built Epic starting in 1991, without investors, without massive complex financial entanglements, just go out, make a fun game and profit from it. And this is a great time for this. And the pace of innovation in the industry right now with mobile devices and also with Oculus, introducing really practical, interesting VR, it's going to be a very interesting time to see all of this come together. I feel like the next generation of games will be built around a very different set of technologies and infrastructures in the past. It's going to be developer-centric rather than retail-centric, and it's going to be very open and exciting.
Yeah, I agree. There's so many different types of venues essentially for it. Everything from gaming on your small, tiny but very efficient laptop to your tablet, to the various different business models that are out there that actually results in completely different games and game development processes. It's really all. And I think there's ideally you want a healthy mix of a little bit of all this, because it's also not fully clear which ones will actually be the most successful in the future. But the type of games that we have on PC and the larger games, will always be a market for that type of experience, at least in my view. And yeah, it's really exciting. Tons of cool stuff to work on.
Yeah. Well, so I just everyone should hopefully have gotten something interesting out of today's conversation. I mean, we covered a lot of ground. I really want to thank John, Tim, and Johan for coming to Montreal to spend some time with us, share their thoughts on gaming, technology, the future, G-Sync, everything else. It's a rare treat. Never happened before to have them all together at the same place. So let's all give them a big round of applause.